Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, and Merry Christmas. Today we are breaking down our first NY6 Bowl game of this 2019 postseason, the Cotton Bowl, between number 17 Memphis and number 10 Penn State. And guys, let me tell you, this is a sneaky good matchup here. I think a lot of times people look at a Group of 5 school playing a Power 5 school and they just immediately give the win to that Power 5 program. That is not necessarily the case here. I'm expecting a dogfight between the Tigers and the Nittany Lions. And we'll take a look at Memphis first. Just amazing how much can change in a decade for these college football programs, whether it's for good or for bad. And in the case for Memphis, it is very, very good. As we approach the end of the decade, it's always fun to look back. Memphis began this decade with a 1-11 record. Kicked off the decade with a 1-11 record, and now, as we approach the end, they are sitting at 12-1 with a chance to win this game and finish 13-1 and maybe even finish in the top 10. Going from one of the worst teams in the country to now a potential top 10 or at least top 25 team in the country. Truly amazing how much can change in a relatively short amount of time. One of the bigger storylines to follow is that Memphis will be without their head coach, Mike Norvell, in this game. He, of course, leaving to take that Florida State head coaching job, and they promoted Ryan Silverfield to head coach. He was just going to be the interim for this game. He got the permanent job. He advocated for it. The Tigers gave him what he wanted. And I think that's a phenomenal hire for Memphis to promote a coach from within. Keeps a lot of consistency with these players, and that goes a long way, especially with a huge bowl game against a solid Penn State squad. When you look at the Nittany Lions, they're playing in their third NY6 Bowl game in the past 4 years. All different ones at that. The Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, and now the Cotton Bowl. They are 1-1 in those previous 2 NY6 Bowl games, and they're 10-2 on the year. They're a top 10 team for a reason. There's only 2 losses coming to Minnesota on the road and Ohio State on the road. Both very solid teams in both games that Penn State was fairly competitive in. So that is something to really watch out for and just a stat to follow as they go up against a very solid Memphis squad. When you look at this game, you're going to see a lot of points. Both of these schools have very dynamic offenses, and I'm a huge fan of shootouts. I love offense. And so that's why I'm really, really excited for this game. Memphis averaging 40.5 points per game. Penn State averaging 34.3. So they can, each of them, put up points. And each of them have what I like to call the big three. 3 huge playmakers on offense for both Memphis and Penn State. And we'll start with the Tigers here, led by their junior quarterback in Brady White. Over 3,500 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions on the year. Not a bad mark at all. Arguably the best, or at least one of the best quarterbacks in the entire American Athletic Conference. They are then led in the running game by freshman Kenneth Gainwell. He's rushed for over 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. And that's to be expected, guys. Memphis in recent years, whether it was under Justin Fuente or even now under Mike Norvell before he left for Florida State, they've been fairly balanced offensively. They've had great quarterbacks to complement a dominant running game. Let's look at, Darrell Henderson last year. Now you've got Gainwell now playing extremely good, extremely well. This football team peaking really at the right time. They've played well all season, but now more so than ever. And then at the wide receiver position for Memphis, you've got DeMonte Coxey, junior wide receiver, over 1,100 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns. Been one of Brady White's favorite targets to go to, and one of the more reliable targets to go to in 2019. So Memphis, they have plenty of playmakers. Those are just the big 3. Plenty more outside of that, but those are the 3 that you need to watch out for, and the 3 that have been such a main reason as to why Memphis is 12-1 and playing in the Cotton Bowl. When you look at Penn State, putting up major numbers as well. Their big 3, just like Memphis, you've got a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver. You've got Sean Clifford, and I've got to give a lot of credit to James Franklin here. I don't think many people expected big things from this Penn State offense, especially at the quarterback position. You lose Trace McSorley, one of the best quarterbacks to ever come through Penn State. You had Tommy Stevens, a experienced and reliable backup who transferred late in the offseason to Mississippi State. So they give Sean Clifford the job, a sophomore quarterback, and he has done, I think, better than anyone could have hoped for. Over 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Now, do keep in mind that he did get injured against Ohio State, did not play in their season finale against Rutgers. He should be back for this Cotton Bowl. I believe that was just more of a cautionary thing for James Franklin, that season finale, but something to keep an eye out for, whether Clifford is 100% or not in this matchup against the Tigers. They've got a sophomore running back in Journey Brown. Once again, you lose Saquon Barkley 2 years ago. You wonder how Penn State's running game is going to do. They're doing extremely well. I think they're doing just fine. Journey Brown, just a sophomore, 688 yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground. And then you've got KJ Hamler, one of the most explosive wide receivers in the country, definitely just in the Big Ten, 858 yards and 8 touchdowns. Out of all those 6 players that I just mentioned, you know what the craziest stat to me is that none of them, not one of these 6 players, the big 3 for each team, is a senior. Which means that Memphis and Penn State could have all 6 of these players back next year in 2020, which is going to set up a lot of success. And I think Penn State has a better chance of doing that than Memphis does, as Clifford, Journey Brown, and KJ Hamler are all just sophomores. They're all just sophomores. And Journey Brown and Sean Clifford certainly aren't NFL ready. Hamler could go if he decided, but I do think he will stay. And the X factor for Penn State that I'm going to throw in there as well is their tight end, Pat Freiermuth, who's also a sophomore. So a lot of Penn State's big offensive players, very, very young. And Freiermuth deciding that he's not going pro, he's coming back next year, which is just going to make Penn State even more of a contender. So Memphis and Penn State set up for some success much further down the road, not just now in 2019. But Freiermuth at tight end for Penn State, I have him down as the X factor because he gives Penn State that extra option that Memphis just doesn't have. He gives Penn State a big tight end that is not only a sure-handed receiver, 468 yards and 7 touchdowns, but is also a phenomenal blocker, something that Penn State is definitely going to need in this matchup against the Tigers. So he's the player to watch out for. He could be the big difference maker in this game. Something that I'm really, really excited to see is how he performs against the Tigers, one of the best tight ends in the entire nation. When you look at the defense for these 2 squads, Penn State definitely owns the edge. There's no doubt in my mind, and when you look at the stats, there should not be a doubt in your mind either. The Nittany Lions allowing just 14.1 points per game and 97.7 rushing yards per game. That is not a bad mark. When you're playing in the Big Ten, guys, especially in the Big Ten East, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, guys like that, 97.7 rushing yards per game is a phenomenal mark and something that Memphis needs to be prepared for, maybe not getting much production out of Kenneth Gainwell. But defensively, they are led by first-team All-American Micah Parsons at linebacker, a phenomenal leader and a phenomenal player for this Nittany Lions team. And just like those players we mentioned on offense, just a sophomore. First-team All-American, just a sophomore for the Nittany Lions. This team is looking really scary, and to finish a year with a 11-win season and a win in New Year's 6 Bowl game just gives them more momentum going into what could be a huge 2020 season if the majority of these players stick around for James Franklin and his squad. When you look at Memphis defensively, they're allowing 24.4 points per game. That's not a great mark. Not bad. Not bad at all, actually, but not great from the American. 200.7 passing yards per game. I'm not too worried about that. Clifford and Hamler, they're going to put up numbers. Memphis just has to do their best to shut it down. The number that I'm more concerned about and that I've got circled here is the fact that Memphis allows 171.6 rushing yards per game. That's my fear for Memphis. Journey Brown and this rushing attack from Penn State is no joke. And they might be able to take a lot of pressure off of Sean Clifford, especially if he's not 100%, by just thrashing this Memphis rushing defense that's been very vulnerable all season long. So that's the number I've got circled here, and something that Memphis needs to perfect and be aware of going into this game, that you're going to have to focus heavily on KJ Hamler and the passing attack, but that running game could just be as deadly. And especially since they're allowing over 170 per game, that's a major cause of concern. The biggest key for me is, yes, can Memphis stop the run? Can Memphis defense show up? But my biggest key is, can Penn State's defense show up and stop the Memphis passing game? Because we mentioned Kenneth Gainwell playing so well at running back, but their strength is passing the ball with Brady White. That's going to be their bread and butter in this game. And really, that's going to be how Memphis has to win this game, considering how strong Penn State's rushing defense is. So can Penn State stop Memphis's passing game? Because they can certainly be beat through the air. Tanner Morgan from Minnesota put up monster numbers against Penn State in that Nittany Lions loss. Peyton Ramsey from Indiana put up monster numbers in Happy Valley in that win for Penn State. So we have seen that Penn State allows a lot of yards to opposing quarterbacks. And they're allowing 232.5 passing yards per game. That's another cause for concern here. Brady White will put up big numbers, but can Penn State just slow it down? Can they get some turnovers or rattle them early that makes life a little more difficult over the course of this entire game for Memphis? So our pick in the Cotton Bowl, we mixed in a little history here, but we also just mentioned a lot of the stats that we just went over with you. Group of 5 teams, we mentioned at the beginning, they usually get counted out rather early, but they have been very competitive in New Year's 6 bowl games over the past few years. From Boise State, who consistently plays well against Power 5 opponents and might just as well play well in this bowl game against Washington. You look at that, how well they've played. You've got Western Michigan, who played well against Wisconsin a few years ago in the Cotton Bowl. You look at Houston, who beat Florida State. You look at UCF, who beat Auburn a few years ago and took LSU to the wire last year. Group of 5 schools that earned this bowl berth, they earn it for a reason. Just like Memphis earned this one for a reason. They're not just going to roll over and get blown out. It's going to be a very close game down in Arlington. Expect a cotton, they call it the Cotton Bowl Classic. And it's certainly going to be a classic down in Arlington. But Penn State has way more experience and way more size and way more speed. And I am predicting that the Nittany Lions win a 1-possession game over Memphis. It's going to be a phenomenal game, but the Nittany Lions win late. James Franklin gets the job done here. They certainly own a coaching edge as Memphis is dealing with the loss of Mike Norvell. But expect a fun one down in Arlington. My guy, Murph the Surf, I'm sorry that I'm not picking Memphis to pull this one out, but you got to be proud of your Memphis Tigers finishing the season at 12-2 and certainly setting themselves up for some great success in the near future, just like Penn State will be by winning this game and clinching an 11-win season. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to like this video and check out everything we have for you in the description below. The spread pick for this Cotton Bowl and every other bowl game can be found over at thegridironexpert.com, as well as some more college football content and offers that you do not want to miss. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.